Yo, book nerds! Today I want to talk about translated books. I am currently reading the Aeneid by Virgil, and I have been reading a lot of translated books this year. Actually, every book that I have read so far this year has been translated, and it's gotten me thinking about translated works. So I want to talk about what's been on my mind. So there's an argument to be made about whether you should or shouldn't read translated works, whether you should read a book in the original language because maybe that is the intended language. Maybe there are nuances in the language that you won't get once it's translated. So reading in the original language is best. I would say that opinion has merit. Yes, if you can read something in the original language, you probably should, for those very reasons. There is probably nuances to the phrasing, things that you will not understand that are cultural, that once it's translated, it loses that. So yes, I think if you can read the original language of any work, maybe that is the best option. However, I cannot read Latin. I cannot read Greek. I cannot read other languages. I could maybe read Spanish. I have read Spanish. I haven't fully read an entire novel in Spanish, but I have read chunks of books in Spanish. But most languages I can't read unless it's English. So that would close a lot of doors for me if I did not read a translation. That was my only option. I would miss out on so many stories if I didn't read a translated work. So what does that really mean? How do I kind of justify that it's okay? Well, like I said, I have been reading exclusively translated works this year so far. So I am reading the Aeneid. I've read the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, which are translated from Greek. This is translated from Latin. I also just finished the Oresteia. I'm working on getting a review done for this. This was translated from Greek. And I recently read Beowulf with my students, which even though it is English, it is Old English. And we read a translation because I can't read Old English. It is like reading a completely different language. So reading all these translations made me think, because the one thing that all of these books have in common is that they're ancient classics. Quite a few of these books, with the exception of the Aeneid and the Oresteia, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and Beowulf, those books were all told orally originally. They were not written down until later. When you tell a story orally from one person to the next, the story's gonna change. Even if it's the same person, from one telling to the next telling, it's gonna change. There are gonna be variations, and that's okay. The essence of the story is the same. Just think of that telephone game you played as a kid where you whisper something in someone's ear, they whisper it in another person's ear, and it goes around the circle. When it gets back to you, it's usually changed from what you started with. So that's like oral storytelling. The original work is probably much different than what we have written down. But the essence of the story remains the same. Hopefully. Anyway. So that's very similar to what happens when you translate a work. When you translate a work, there's going to be variations. There's going to be some different meanings that are coming through. Some might be lost, some new meanings might be gained, but the essence of the story remains the same in a good translation. And that's true of ancient classics and modern books that are translated. So you can see the justification easily for those ancient classics that were already told orally, that were varied already. Okay, yes, let's accept the variations of the translations because the story was already varied. Modern books is a little different. It's a little harder to make that argument, but I think it's still valid. Because with a modern book, okay, maybe we didn't tell it orally. Take The Queen of the South by Arturo Perez Reverte. This was translated to English by Andrew Hurley. Originally written in Spanish. Maybe I could have read the Spanish, but I didn't. I chose to read the English. Modern book, English translation. So, it's hard to make the argument to accept the variations because this story was never told orally. Or was it? We have these things called audiobooks. Tons and tons of books have audiobooks. I have not looked up if The Queen of the South has an audiobook. I would guess that it does. Even if it doesn't, we still do have oral tellings. People read stories out loud all the time. I read picture books out loud to my kids all the time. So that's still oral. Those are still oral stories. And even if the words are the same, the way I read it orally is different than somebody else. I emphasize different words than somebody else. Even on different reads, if I'm reading a picture book to my kids, I might emphasize words one way one time, and then the next time I read it, I might emphasize different words. So there are still subtle variations in the story anyway, even though the words are the same. That can also be applied to modern translations. The words may be translated, but the essence of the story remains the same in a good translation. I might be getting a slightly different story, slightly different meaning, but the overall story is still the same. Now, if you have a very bad translation, that's another story. Then find a different translation, because there are bad translations out there. But I totally think that reading a translated work is totally fine. You will miss out on so many amazing stories if you don't read translated works. And my argument in support of them is that nobody reads the same story anyway. From all the way back, from the time of Homer and the Iliad, stories have been told and stories have had variations, but they live on and they're enjoyed and they are still wonderful. All the way up to present day modern translations, they may vary, but you're still getting a great story out of it that you wouldn't have got otherwise. I think you should check out translated works. If you can read them in the original, good on you. Go for it. That is probably the best way. But don't write off translations because you think you won't get the same story. You're going to get a slight variation of it, but it's going to be awesome. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but it's something I feel strongly about. And I know that it's been debated. Some people say, oh, you shouldn't read the Iliad in English. It loses so much. But you know what? I'm not learning Greek anytime soon. So if I don't read a translation, I'm going to miss out on an epic, pun intended, an epic story. And this is one of my top books of the year for sure. And I'm so glad that I read the English translation. So yeah, I just have to give my 2 cents there. I'm not learning Latin anytime soon. I know a few words in Latin, but I am not learning Latin anytime soon. So I am quite enjoying Virgil's translated works. Anyway, I have read many translations and I will continue to do so. If you find a bad translation though, seriously, find a new one because you can't let it deter you. Drop down in the comments and let me know your thoughts on this debate. I would love to chat with you there. That's all I have for you guys this week, and I will talk to you next Monday. Hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for talking books with me.